Hello guys, and welcome to another awesome Pro Guides video. My name is Dan, and today we have a great topic for you guys. We're going to be going over the top 10 tips for newer players. We get that CSGO can be a pretty difficult game to get into, so we wanted to share some of the tips that helped us climb the ranked ladder as we were just starting out. Starting things off today, we're going to talk about peeking. Peeking is a huge part of CSGO, but also unfortunately one of the most difficult to master. There are three basic types of peeks you should be going for, which are wide peek, a jiggle peek, and a shoulder peek. These different types of peeks all serve a different purpose in different situations. Starting with the wide peek, this is the type of peek where you really swing around an angle and move pretty far away from cover. It's mostly used for when you're ready to take a fight and try to spray down an enemy, but works especially well against AWPERS or anyone holding the angle up close. The reason this is so useful is because most people watching an angle like that will keep their crosshair close to the angle to try and catch anyone using our next peek, the jiggle peek. Jiggle peeking is a fun peek with a fun name. This is where you will be constantly hitting your strafe keys to quickly get vision around an angle while not exposing yourself too much to enemy fire. You just want to barely be able to see around the angle on a jiggle peek, but don't think just because you're exposing only a little of yourself that you're safe. Shoulder peeking is our last type of peek, and this is normally reserved for when you're trying to bait out someone to take a shot at you. Shoulder peeking is exactly how it sounds. You peek around a corner, but you don't actually get vision of the area you're peeking. Instead, you're just letting your shoulder be visible for a split second to try and get people to react by shooting it. This will not only give away their position, but hopefully give you an idea of how many enemies you might be looking at. So, we talked about how to peek an angle, but what about trying to hold them? Holding an angle can be accomplished in many different ways. If you want to be sneaky and try to get the drop on someone, you could hold an angle like catwalk on A-site cache, where you're on the other side of the angle and holding a very shallow angle. Holding an angle like this tends to be what the CSGO community calls a one and done, meaning that you will probably get one kill then die because of how exposed you are once the enemies know where you are. A more traditional way to hold an angle brings us right back to cache, but this time we're going to take a look at headshot on B-site. Headshot is the call out for the space between tree and site, where a counter-terrorist can expose only their head and take shots at anyone pushing out of B main. This is a more traditional angle for a few reasons. Firstly is you are more perpendicular to the angle you are watching, which means that as people push into B main, you will be able to see them a lot sooner. Second is the abundance of cover around headshot to reposition to if the terrorists suddenly develop some smarts and start tossing utility to force you out of position. This cover gives you multiple different options to play with your enemies until backup arrives from mid to help out. Most of the time you probably want to opt for holding a more traditional angle and simply fall back to different cover when things get too dangerous, but the best way to mess with your enemy is to do something they don't expect, and holding a one and done angle might accomplish just that. Utility usage is one of the most important things that you can learn about in CSGO. With every team being able to carry 5 smokes, 10 flashes, 5 frag grenades, and 5 decoys, there's no shortage of stuff to chuck at your enemies. Let's take a look at a game that is pretty similar to CSGO in a lot of ways, Valorant. In that game, you'll notice a lot of things similar to CSGO, except one thing, the lack of as much utility per team. Since utility in Valorant is handled by agents or characters you pick before the match, each team is locked into a certain amount of utility per game depending on what agents they chose. The reason we're talking about Valorant here is to show a point. As it stands right now, 3 out of Valorant's 4 maps are defender-sided, and it has to do with the lack of utility. Since a Valorant team has access to maybe 3 or 4 smokes per round, AWPers on defense are allowed to roam free and pick players off without the fear of being smoked off or flashed. So in a game like CSGO, where there's so much utility available to the attackers, be sure to use it as much as you can. Even if you don't know any advanced lineups or cool pop flashes, that's fine. Try your best to throw a flash that will blind people on site, or toss a smoke to just cover an angle so you can push up. If you don't use your utility as the terrorist, then you're giving the counter-terrorists an easy time popping heads with no worry about being contested. Dealing with AWPers is another tough topic, but with some basic grenades, you can really make someone regret ever spending the cash on an AWP. The most useful grenade by far for dealing with an AWPer are smoke grenades. Blocking off line of sight for an AWP for 15 seconds is a hugely powerful buff that you should be taking advantage of if you have the extra smoke. Most of the time, you probably won't have that extra smoke on hand, but no worries, as flashes are the next best thing. Something tells me that it's hard to use a marksman's rifle when your eyes get turned to mush because of 5 flashbangs. Do be careful when peeking after a flash, however. Most good AWPers have mastered the 180 flick to dodge a flash and be ready to shoot right after it pops. If you're playing against one of those more skilled players, your best bet as a team is to save a smoke or two for dealing with him. Whether you're silver or global, warming up should be an important part of every player's routine. Especially with the amount of workshop maps and free aim training tools available, no one has an excuse to not warm up before playing. You don't even need to do anything that crazy. Just some simple aim warm-up maps or even just straight-up deathmatch is fine. For a more complex warm-up, try looking for the workshop map Aimbots by Uletical. It's a great warm-up map that you can use to practice your aim or tracking. If you aren't a fan of downloading workshop maps, then try out some community or Valve deathmatch servers. The community servers normally have some interesting mods and config files to help you warm up or practice in specific ways like headshot-only modes, pistol-only, or no armor. If you're serious about trying to get better, warming up isn't the only thing you should try. Check out ProGuides.com. We have amazing CSGO talent just waiting to help you climb to the top. Check the link in the description or go to ProGuides.com to learn more. We all know those toxic players who ruin the game. They aren't fun to play with, and sometimes not even fun to play against. They truly can ruin a game for everyone involved, but luckily, Valve has a nice old mute button for us. If you find someone trying to get a reaction out of people by being toxic or saying stupid things, the best thing you can do is to try to ignore them and continue giving callouts. If this behavior still doesn't stop, just mute them and move on. The worst thing you can do in this situation is give in to the salt and start flaming them back. While not all toxic players plan to be toxic when they enter a game, trying to flame someone into listening to you, I think, has maybe worked about never out of all the times it has been tried. If the person is getting on your nerves that much, trust me, the relief is so much better when you don't have to listen to them. Sometimes it's good to give yourself motivation in the form of calling yourself out on what you did wrong. That being said, don't beat yourself up over mistakes. Learn from the experience and move on with the game. Do your best to let it go and focus on the coming round. When you start to give in to the self-deprecating thoughts, you've already lost the game. Stay positive, rally your team, and rush B. If you're having trouble letting go of mistakes you've made in a match, just try to remind yourself that literally everyone, including pros, make horrible blunders all the time. I don't think I need to say more than the name Summit1G for most of you to understand what I'm referring to. But just in case you've been living under a rock, Summit1G is a former professional CSGO player who once filled in for a member of the pro team Splice. In Splice's match against CLG, Summit managed to get the final kill in a 15-11 round. All Summit had to do was defuse the bomb and Splice would win the series. But unfortunately, while prematurely celebrating, Summit wasn't paying attention to his screen and accidentally ran through his own Molotov, killing him. So yeah, even the pros make mistakes. And just be glad you aren't Summit who has to keep reliving their past mistakes because of Twitch chat. If you can't outfight them, outsmart them. Not all games can be won based on your skills alone. Regardless of how good you are at the game, there's always someone out there who's better than you or simply having a good day. That's where the mind games come to play. During a competitive game, you should always be trying to predict your enemy's next move at every point in the game while making your own movement unpredictable. It'll take some time to master, but once you're accustomed to reading your enemies, you'll find yourself accurately predicting your enemy's exact locations on the map. Focus on reading the layout of the map, know the time it takes to rotate from one site to another, and above all else, just communicate information with your team. It's good to try to be unexpected, do occasional rushes through smokes, and you might catch some enemies off guard and score some free kills. Even consider going as far as to push through your own smokes as a CT when the terrorists will be expecting you to guard the site. At the same time, these are pretty dangerous to be doing regularly, so sometimes the most unexpected thing you can do is to just sit back, relax, and let the enemies roll into your crosshair. If you get some information that all 5 terrorists are about to rush B no stop, it might be a better idea to just give them the site and wait for your team to retake. Now, if you opt for this play, know that if terrorists take a site easily, they're going to start hunting for frags to try and get the man advantage and make it even more difficult for the counter-terrorists to retake the site, and that's where your massive brain shines. Since you gave up the site but are also aware that the terrorists are probably going to try and hunt you down, you can just hold an angle and wait for them to start getting antsy and start peeking you. We do like to talk a lot about the economy and economy management during our videos, but that's only because it is so important. Economy is the key to winning a competitive game in any rank. From pistol rounds to the end of the game, be sure to keep track of what you can buy and what you'll need to save for the next round or two. One mistake newer players make is to save the $800 you get in the pistol rounds. Now, especially if you're on the T side, you might think, but they can one-tap me. While this is true, you stand a much better chance at not getting one-tapped if you invest in some utility to block vision or force people off angles. In later rounds, it's worth taking a second to try and calculate how much money you will have next round if you lose. Luckily, CSGO displays this information for you on the scoreboard right above where it shows the rounds. If you don't have enough money to buy all the things you need for this round, it might be worth taking a save and just waiting for the next round to buy. Sounds are an important game mechanic in CSGO, as hearing various sounds in games such as footsteps, weapon pickups, and even switching fire modes can give away you or the enemy's position. Having headphones on, and most importantly, having the sound on in-game, will give you a pretty good advantage over an enemy that isn't using audio cues or has their audio off. You can use sounds to trick the enemy, for example, fake defusing or planting. But it is also important to be aware of when it is appropriate to make noise and when it's not. If you're trying to sneak behind the entire enemy team for an awesome 5-man spray down, you probably don't want to be constantly tossing your weapon and running around unless you like to get your head taken off. On the other hand, if you need to get to a bomb site before the counter-terrorists get there, then it doesn't really matter how much sound you make, because the counter-terrorists probably already have an idea for where you're going, so you better run and try to get there as fast as possible. Well guys, that's all we have here for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to smack that like button, and if you're feeling extra zesty, even consider hitting the subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe my friends, and peace out.